This is Beiping, a beautiful mountain village with a special place in the illustrious history of the CPC. As Zhou Enlai, first Premier of People's Republic of China, once pointed out, Beiping was the last rural command post of the CPC Central Committee headed by Chairman Mao prior to entering Beiping for the liberation of the entire country. When President Xi Jinping visited Beiping, he said to the cadres and the masses,
这个真正是温故而知新啊，不在你来是第一次来还是来过多次，每一次来都会有一些新的感受。中国共产党无数革命先烈，革命政权来之不易啊，当年新中国从这里走出去的。
1945, a time of jubilation, victory in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression. But the times of struggle were not over. China now faced a choice between two futures. Chiang Kai-shek now began to reignite civil war, constantly vying for territorial advantage with American aid, never ceasing to plunder and exploit. In August 1945, Chiang Kai-shek telegraphed Yan'an 3 times in succession, inviting Mao Zedong to attend talks in Chongqing. His real purpose, however, was to buy time as he prepared for civil war. Mao Zedong accepted these overtures in good faith. Putting considerations of personal safety to one side, he departed for Chongqing, determined to secure peace. On August 28, 1945, his plane touched down at Jiulongpo airfield near Chongqing. In a move widely acclaimed for its boldness, Mao Zedong was the first to step out of the cabin. After 43 grueling days of talks, a bargain was struck on October 10th, the Double 10th Agreement. Amidst the stresses and strains of these talks, Mao Zedong, in his own hand, wrote out a poem he had composed in 1936 for his friend Liu Yangtze, Snow, to the tune of Qin Yuan Chun, that ends with this line: For truly great men, look to this age alone. To many, this struck a chord. Now was the time for the whole people to show their greatness. In June 1946, Chiang Kai-shek brazenly tore up the Double 10th Agreement and attacked the Central Plain liberated area, unleashing full-scale civil war. With a strength of 1.27 million, the Communist People's Liberation Army, or PLA, was vastly outnumbered by the 4.3 million troops of the KMT's National Revolutionary Army. But the PLA had something more powerful than numbers. As Mao Zedong told American journalist Anna Louise Strong in Yan'an, all reactionaries are paper tigers. In the long run, the truly powerful forces do not belong to the reactionaries, but to the people. The PLA broke through the KMT's encirclement in the Central Plains, then won a series of campaigns in East China, forcing the Kuomintang to shift the focus of its campaign to the key liberated areas in northern Shanxi and Shandong. Northern Shanxi was the HQ of the CPC Central Committee. 20,000 PLA soldiers standing in the way of Hu Zongnan and his 250,000 KMT troops. But Mao Zedong was unfazed. Do not be troubled by the loss of a single city or place. We exchange Yan'an for all China. Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai were among the last to withdraw from Yan'an. On entry into Yan'an, Hu Zongnan's troops flaunted themselves. Chiang Kai-shek also flew there for inspection. Yan'an, however, was empty. Led by Mao Zedong, the CPC Central Committee and the PLA headquarters carried on the fight on the rugged Loess Plateau, directing the course of the Liberation War both in the northwest and nationally. It was a time of acute danger. On one occasion, the jeep in which Mao Zedong was riding was attacked by enemy planes.
"主席他很风趣的，他上了车以后，他说：‘哎呀，这不错嘛，给我这个车上贴了一朵花，贴了一朵花。他打了以后，这个玻璃不是有一种这个闪纹嘛，像一朵花似的。’
During the move, Mao heard a moving story. It concerned the heroic deeds of Liu Hulan, secretary of a women's patriotic association in Yangtze village, Shanxi province. In January 1947, the KMT men surrounded the small village. Liu Hulan, who had been resolute and unyielding, even when captured and facing certain death. Was she a Communist Party member? Asked Mao. An outstanding one, and only 15 years old, replied Run Bishe. Mao was so deeply moved by her story that he wrote the famous line, "A great life, a glorious death." Soon after, Yangtze village was liberated.
也是在26台杀害6号那个，他是我们这个旅小队的，我把那个大虎连长抓了。
On the northwestern front, the Northwest Field Army led by Peng Dehuai and Shi Zhongshun was slogging it out in a bloody war of attrition. It took 3 successive victories in Xinhuabian, Yangmahe and Panlong towns to stabilize the situation in northern Shaanxi. Meanwhile, on the Shandong front, Chen Yi and Su Yu, commanding the East China Field Army, launched the Mengliangu campaign, in which the 74th Reorganized Division was completely destroyed as a fighting force, and the chief commander of the division, Jiang Lingfu, shot dead. Great courage and fortitude was displayed in this engagement. As the battle reached a crescendo, a company of troops became cut off by the rising Wenhe River. More than 30 local women jumped into the icy river and built a human-supported bridge with the doors on their shoulders.
我们不能抓住妇女同志的肩膀隔阂，我们还是趟水吧啊！我说同志，你说的不对啊，这是关键时刻，时间就是胜利，时间就是保证，不能犹豫啊，请同志们过桥。
So, the soldiers, moved to tears, trotted across this special raft bridge. In July 1947, at a meeting in Xiaohe village in northern Shaanxi, the CPC Central Committee assessed the military situation. The defensive campaign had been a success. The moment had now come to go on the offensive. With Liu Bocheng and Deng Xiaoping commanding, the main body of the Shanxi Hebei Shandong Henan Field Army crossed the Yellow River into the Dabie Mountains. Now, all was in place for the PLA's strategic offensive. The army, led by Deng Xiaoping and Liu Bocheng, was now in a position to spearhead a strategic offensive, flanked by the armies of Chongqing and Chen Yi, striking into the enemy's heart in a coordinated attack. Mao Zedong later observed that this was the turning point. 20 years of Chiang Kai-shek misrule and a century of imperialist domination were coming to an end. The consequences of KMT misrule soon made themselves felt in the form of soaring prices in areas still under their control. In desperation, KMT agents resorted to assassination. Democratic activists Li Gongpu and Wen Yiduo were just a few of the victims of KMT villainy. In reaction, patriotic students and Democrats threw themselves bravely into the struggle against hunger, civil war, and persecution, forming a second front in the People's Liberation War. The Kuomintang was now isolated from the entire country. In July 1947, the Working Committee of the CPC Central Committee held a national land conference in Xibaipo. The outline land law of China was formulated and then approved and released by the CPC Central Committee in October. Land reform abolished feudal land ownership and made the vast mass of peasants the owners of the land. People in the liberated areas flocked to the PLA banner to take up arms against the KMT.
解放了的人民纷纷涌入自己的部队，为了自由，为了解放，为了子孙们的幸福，他们带着仇恨，带着决心，上前方作战去。
Many KMT soldiers, originally peasants themselves, joined the PLA after they were captured.
对他们进行政治教育以后，他们立刻把国民党的帽徽撕下来，蒋介石的军队就这样的瓦解了，人民解放军就这样壮大了。
In December 1947, the CPC Central Committee held a meeting in Yangzhe village, northern Shanxi, and formulated an action program to overthrow Chiang Kai-shek and liberate all China. The famous 10 principles of military operation were proposed, the core of which is to concentrate superior forces and annihilate the enemy one by one. On May 25, 1948, in the battle to liberate Longhua County of Hebei, squad leader Dong Sun-rei, without a thought for his own life, charged an enemy blockhouse with explosives, blazing a trail for victory with his own flesh and blood. The war ground on slowly, but surely, to its decisive phase. On September 12, 1948, the Liaoning Shenyang campaign began. Following the Central Military Commission strategy, the first battle was fought in Jinzhou to encircle the massive KMT army in the northeast. Zhu Rui, artillery commander of the Northeast Field Army, gave his life in action against the enemy. He was the highest-ranking PLA officer killed in action in the War of Liberation. The campaign to seize Jinzhou began. The advance was spearheaded by flag-bearer Zhu Wanlin, who was shot the moment he rushed up the city wall and made the supreme sacrifice. Taking up the standard, squad leader Zhao Hongquan advanced until he too fell to gunfire, leaving it to platoon leader Liu Jin to take the red flag to the breach, where he too was shot. In the end, it was soldier Li Yumin who made the fourth attempt and firmly planted the red flag in the breach. This all happened in the space of 3 minutes. The Liaoning Shenyang campaign lasted 52 days. A total of 472,000 enemy soldiers were neutralized and northeast China was liberated. The stage was now set for the Huaihai campaign, the second campaign of the final offensive.
这次战役呀，是在党中央和毛主席 统一领导下，是在以邓小平同志为书记的总前委统一领导和指挥下，华东野战军、中原野战军和地方兵团密切配合下，向长江以北将军的主力进行了一次歼灭性的打击。
On the Huaihai battlefield, the PLA was outnumbered, 600,000 troops facing the KMT's 800,000. Cleverly concentrating forces to destroy Huang Baitao's 7th Army, Wang Wei's 12th Army, and Du Yuming's army group, the PLA once again won against the odds.
这次战略呢，毛主席啊，一个很形象的一个说法啊，这是一次没有举手的饭，就是我们2夜3夜硬把它吃下去了。
The Huaihai campaign lasted 66 days and involved enemy losses of more than 555,000 captured, wounded or killed. The front of the People's Liberation War was approaching the Yangtze River and South China. Every last bowl of rice and every last foot of cloth was sent to the army. It was a time when people sacrificed all they could for the greater good, giving up their meager possessions, waving goodbye to their beloved. As Marshal Chen Yi once said, victory in the Huaihai campaign was down to the wheelbarrows of the common people. The Huaihai campaign saw the mobilization of some 5.43 million ordinary men and women. It was a people's war in every sense. In North China, the Northeast Field Army and the main force of the North China military region jointly launched the Beiping-Tianjin campaign. 29 hours after the start of the PLA's general offensive, the impregnable city of Tianjin fell.
市中心的大桥是预先指定的会师地点，两支军队胜利会师了。
After 29 hours of fighting, Tianjin was liberated. At this time in Beiping, the more than 200,000 soldiers under Fu Zuoyi's command were surrounded by close on 1 million PLA soldiers. To save the century-old capital from the ravages of war, the PLA initiated a negotiation with Fu Zuoyi. Fu's eldest daughter, Fu Dongju, was a clandestine member of the Communist Party. Assigned by the party organization, she returned from Tianjin to Beiping to urge her father to accept the Communist Party's peace terms.
他就想把北京保存下来，能够使他的这些人别都死掉了。整个的来讲，他还是觉得挺好的，这事情解决了。
Thanks to the constant endeavors of the CPC Central Committee and the PLA, Fu Zuoyi finally accepted the PLA's conditions, leading his troops out of the city for rectification. In the end, Beiping was peacefully liberated. On February 3rd, the PLA held a victory parade in Beijing, then called Beiping. The city's legation quarter had been an area where Chinese people were banned from entering. On the orders of Chairman Mao Zedong, armed PLA soldiers marched through the area in high spirits. The time when Western powers running amok in China had officially ended. In the three major campaigns, the KMT suffered total losses of more than 1.54 million men. Its main military forces, on which it relied to maintain its reactionary rule, had been largely destroyed. On December 30th, 1948, Mao Zedong issued a New Year's message: to carry the revolution through to the end. In April 1949, the Kuomintang regime refused to sign the Agreement on Internal Peace, reached by representatives of both parties after negotiation. Mao Zedong and Zhu De issued the order to the army for the countrywide advance. Millions of PLA soldiers launched the Yangtze River crossing campaign. As the assault boat ploughed through the flying bullets, the soldiers were surprised to find a girl at the helm.
当时我才14岁，和我大哥哥那一条船，当年晚拧来拧去撞了6趟解放军，我这里还被敌人打了一枪，连续7天7夜。
On April 23, 1949, the red flag of the PLA was hoisted over the Nanjing presidential palace. The reactionary rule of the Kuomintang was over. Xiangshan Xuanqing Villa, Beiping. It was here that photographer Xu Xiaobing snapped an iconic picture of Mao Zedong, holding a newly delivered newspaper proclaiming the liberation of Nanjing, a historic moment captured forever. Mao Zedong himself had his own way of commemorating, writing the famous poem, "The People's Liberation Army Captures Nanking." Then the Shanghai campaign began. Because Shanghai was densely populated and home to a myriad of industrial and commercial companies, command headquarters ordered that only light weapons were to be used in urban areas. Artillery and explosives were forbidden, but this humane policy cost the PLA dearly. At Sichuan Road Bridge, the KMT troops, taking up position in a building containing innocent citizens, opened fire on the lightly armed PLA, safe in the knowledge they would not return fire.
This airban 在渡江的时候是第一批登上了南岸，当时打的也很好，也没有一个伤亡。登岸之后一路打到上海，可是 全部牺牲在四川桥下。我记得很清楚，那天是5月25号，再过2天，上海就解放了。这10年了，我一直在想当时这些同志说的一句话。 我们一直说已经踏上新中国的门槛了。
上海人民广播电台，上海人民广播电台，亲爱的听众们，你们好！现在我们开始第1次播音。
Shanghai was liberated. Nearly 8,000 soldiers fell during the fighting. The CPC Central Committee sent a congratulatory telegraph to the Shanghai front that read, "Long live New Shanghai. Long live the independent and free New China. Immortal are the martyrs who sacrificed for the liberation of Shanghai." The PLA continued its march across the country, mopping up pockets of enemy resistance and liberating the rest of the country. Mao Zedong's handwritten contribution to a picture album celebrating the achievements of the 3-year Chinese People's Liberation War said it all. At long last, the victory of the people really had come.
从长夜到日出，走过千山万水的路，每一步都是信仰足迹，烙印下新中国版图。从贫弱到富强，走出复兴，为业征途，每一天都有奋斗牺牲，只为人民拥抱幸福，凭着心中坚定信念，敢叫日月换新天，循关漫道，风雨无阻，会举起中华儿女同向前。从贫弱到富强，走出复兴。